platforming game mascot characters seem to have dominated the popular image of video games. If you ask anybody to name a video game character, they're most likely going to name a mascot of some kind. And every video game company seems to have one. I mean, Nintendo has Mario, Sega has Sonic, Capcom has Mega Man, Ubisoft has Rayman, even though they vastly underutilize him. Crystal Dynamics has Gex, or rather, had Gex. And Accolade has this piece of that everyone seems to love for some reason. However, it seems like one company, Konami, which I have a very complex relationship with, doesn't seem to have a mascot character. I mean, it's not Solid Snake, it's not Raiden, it's really not Pyramid Head as much as they really want him to be, and it sure as heck ain't Bomberman. I'll never forgive them for Bomberman. I'll never forgive them for what they did to Hudson Soft and my beloved Bomber.
Look how they massacred my boy.
Well, what if I told you that Konami kinda did have a mascot character? However, while he was huge in Japan for 2.5 decades, he largely is unknown in the West. He came like a thief in the night, quietly entering the Western video games market in the 90s and then leaving at the turn of the millennium. Because while there were over 30 entries of this series in Japan, North America and Europe only got like 5 of them. Of course, I'm talking about the Ganbare Goemon series. Goemon, Ebisumaru, Sasuke, and Yae, formerly heroes of 2D side-scrolling platformer action games, now entering into the third dimension. You see, Link would not be the only one to get polygons in 1998. Oh no. You see, Goemon and gang would make their triumphant return to Western shores, this time in a new 3D adventure the likes of which no one had ever seen. Rocking the US and abroad in a little game called Mystical Ninja Starring Goemon.
Go. John Cena the way I'm been chillin'. Bitch can't rap, it's best you stay hidden. We off the ice, vanilla, I stay with it. Talk your shit, we get it, you don't get it. This a theme song, turn the beat on. Just picked up your mama in the Nissan. She called me Ben 10, got the green on.
Mystical Ninja Starring Goemon, or known in Japanese as Ganbare Goemon Neo Momoyama Bafuku no Odori, Go For It Goemon Dance of the New Peach Mountain Shogunate, is a 3D platformer action-adventure exploration game developed by Konami and released for the Nintendo 64 in 1998. Set in a fantastical and slightly anachronistic version of Edo period Japan, you play as the 4 main characters of the series: Goemon, a noble thief loosely based off of the real-life Ishikawa Goemon, Ebisumaru, his friend and fellow thief, Sasuke, a robotic ninja, and Yae, a kunoichi who can transform into a mermaid. In Goemon's hometown of Oedo, a mysterious UFO shaped like a peach arrives in town and transforms Oedo Palace into a European-inspired castle. Goemon and the gang soon discover that the people responsible are a group of performers known as the Peach Mountain Shoguns, who want to transform all of Japan into a Western-style fine arts theater to perform on. Not wanting the homes of all Japanese citizens to be dispossessed just so a bunch of theater kids can perform Wicked, Goemon and the gang set off to thwart the Peach Mountain Shogun's reprehensible renovations. This game would be the second Ganbare Goemon, or Mystical Ninja game, to make it to Western shores, the previous one being Legend of the Mystical Ninja on the SNES. Konami was largely hesitant to release the Ganbare Goemon series in the West, considering it to be a bit too Japanese for foreign audiences. And I gotta admit, it is a little oddly specific. The best analog I could think of for more Western audiences would be if, like, I don't know, Atari released a platforming game starring cartoon forms of Robin Hood, Little John, a robotic version of Lancelot, and some female assassin named like Grace or something like that. However, with anime and manga becoming more popular within Western markets during the 80s and 90s, the time seemed right to introduce the noble thief to Western audiences. Also, you may be wondering why this game has the subtitle Starring Goemon, as opposed to calling it something like, I don't know, Mystical Ninja 64. Well, you see, in the first Goemon game to be localized to the West, The Legend of the Mystical Ninja, Goemon and Ebisumaru were renamed to Kid Ying and Dr. Yang in all Western releases. Not wanting to maintain this rather orientalist naming scheme, the localizers of Mystical Ninja Starring Goemon decided to let the characters keep their original names. However, being that many gamers from North America and Europe would only know these characters by their names from the SNES game, the localizing team had to put in a little more effort to softly and retroactively rebrand the characters by their original names. Thus the inclusion of Starring Goemon. They wanted to make sure you knew that this is Goemon and not call him Kid Ying. You see why Orientalism and racism is just a problem for everyone? This headache could have easily been avoided if they didn't rename the characters to begin with. In fact, Mystical Ninja Starring Goemon seems to mock this renaming a little bit. The Peach Mountain Shoguns, who sort of represent westernization, don't refer to Goemon and Ebisumaru by their actual names, but instead call them Fernandez and Antonio, much to their dismay. Alright, I think I've laid enough groundwork and history and context for you to kind of understand where this game is coming from. Mind you, in the modern day, any questions about the context of this game and the cultural elements therein could largely be answered by a cursory search on Google, even though I know some of you don't like doing that. You know who you are. But back in the 90s when Web 1.0 was still a thing, a lot of the times gamers would look at this game and go like, this is so silly. What the heck is this? This is so random. What's going on? Why am I eating this skewered thing to get health? But now, with calmer and more educated minds, we can appreciate this game for what it is. In fact, this game was probably my first introduction to Japanese culture when I was a kid, and I found it all really fascinating. Not enough to join the smelly weebs at my school's local anime club, but still, I found Japanese culture to be very fascinating. There are quite a few aspects of this game that I really, really like. But if I were to start with any of them, I think I'd like to start with the gameplay. Mystical Ninja Starring Goemon is one of the most unique platforming games I've ever played on the Nintendo 64 or otherwise. It's a perfect translation of the gameplay beats from the previous Ganbare Goemon games. You start in a village, going around buying food or other supplies and asking villagers for advice or tips or the fortune teller to tell you where to go. Complete challenges, earn new abilities, enter action stages while you'll fight smaller NPCs and overcome challenges and puzzles, defeat bosses, and then move on to another village, and then rinse and repeat until you've beat the game. However, differentiating it a little bit from a typical platformer, there are optional items that you can collect, such as the cat dolls, which will give you a health upgrade. There are maps for all the action stages. There's even items like keys that you need to get, as well as some other items that'll tell you where the boss room is, making this game an interesting blend of platforming and action-adventure elements, like if Mario and Zelda had a baby. Also, all the playable characters have different weapons, strengths, and abilities that they get throughout the game. For instance, Goemon gets really strong, Ebisumaru can shrink, Yae turns into a mermaid and can swim in water, and Sasuke gets a jetpack. They'll be useful to complete certain challenges, but really what character you play as can come down to simple personal preference. For instance, I like playing as Yae the most because she's faster, and I like how of all the other characters in the game, she's the only one that uses a sword. However, the game also introduces first-person mech battle segments to break up the typical gameplay loop, where you'll control Goemon's giant robot, Impact, and put the beat down on some other giant robotic baddies. Which leads me to another aspect of Mystical Ninja Starring Goemon that I really, really love. The world and setting is truly unique and wacky, but in a way that doesn't feel super contrived. Like, it blends these interesting elements of fantasy with dragons, ghosts, and yokai with more traditionally sci-fi elements like robots and spaceships. And you think that it wouldn't work, but for some reason, I don't question it throughout the whole game. Moreover, I love the main four characters of this game, the noble thief Goemon, the weird and kind of pervy Ebisumaru, the very polite but very capable Sasuke, the very strong and somewhat mysterious Yae. Also, our villains, Spring Breeze Danson and Kitty Lily, are just so over the top and crazy in a way that is very, very funny. I've caught myself laughing multiple times at things they say throughout this game. Additionally, I should note that this game has a laugh track. And no, I'm not kidding about that. Finally, the soundtrack of this game is of note. Anyone you ask about this game will tell you that it's one of the best soundtracks of the Nintendo 64 era. It has such a wide range too, from classical sounding Japanese music, to more zany, wacky music, to something really atmospheric, to more contemporary sounding music. Yet again, they blend this all in a way that doesn't make it seem out of place. Additionally, in the castle levels, the music will change as the level goes on, making it fresh by adding more instruments as the level continues. For example, in the Ghost Toys castle, this is what you hear first. Then this. Then this. I love this because it makes it so that the level music doesn't get stale with repeated listening. Overall, it seems like Konami's sound designers really put their all into this soundtrack. Heck, Even the main theme for this game was performed by Hironobu Kageyama, the same guy that wrote and sang Chala Head Chala, the Japanese theme to Dragon Ball Z. Mystical Ninja Starring Goemon is a game that was fresh and new, even by modern standards, but sadly got swept under the rug by releases like Ocarina of Time and Banjo-Kazooie. And while both of those releases were revolutionary in their own right, I think that Mystical Ninja Starring Goemon deserves a similar spot. At least one of the best games of 1998. It's not terribly long, but it certainly leaves an impression. If you love 3D platformers, play this game. If you don't, still play this game. It's zany, fun, atmospheric, and interesting in a way that a lot of modern 3D platformers still haven't quite scratched. And perhaps you too will have Goemon's Kisuru firmly embedded in your heart.